The last sliver of the sun, a bruised purple and fiery orange, bled across the horizon as Alara's ancient Land Rover rumbled down the desolate, winding track. Rain, a relentless companion for the past 2 hours, had finally softened to a fine, misty veil, clinging to the skeletal branches of the trees that clawed at the sky. She gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, the isolation pressing in around her. This was it. The edge of the world, or at least, the edge of her own. The cottage, when it finally emerged from the swirling mists, was a silhouette against the fading light, squat and sturdy, as if carved from the very rock it clung to. It was ancient, built of dark, sea-worn stone, with a slate roof that gleamed wetly. Perched on a dramatic cliff overlooking the furious churn of the Atlantic, it looked like a sentinel, defiant, and alone. The air, even through the closed window, was thick with the scent of salt, damp earth, and something wild, untamed. She killed the engine, and the sudden silence was profound, broken only by the roar of the ocean below. A shiver, not entirely from the cold, traced its way up her spine. This was a place of raw beauty, a place where one could truly disappear. And disappearing was precisely what Alara Vance needed to do. For too long, her life had been a series of careful edits, a curated existence for public consumption. Here, amidst the elemental force of the coast, she hoped to find the unedited version of herself again. Pushing open the heavy, creaking wooden door of the cottage, she was met with a gust of wind that snatched at her scarf and pulled at her hair. The air inside was cool, carrying the faint, sweet smell of peat smoke and old timber. A single bare bulb glowed weakly from the ceiling of the main living area, casting long dancing shadows. The space was simple, functional, but not without character. A huge stone fireplace dominated one wall, a scattering of dried kindling, and a half-burnt log waiting within its maw. An old, leather-bound armchair sat beside it, invitingly worn. Alara dropped her duffel bag with a thud, the sound echoing in the stillness. Her gaze drifted to the tall, narrow windows, their panes streaked with rain. Beyond them, the turbulent grey of the sea stretched endlessly, merging with the bruised sky. This was no gentle coastal retreat. This was a place that demanded respect, a place that would strip away pretenses. She busied herself with unloading the car, making several trips through the persistent drizzle. Groceries, art supplies, a stack of books she'd been meaning to read for years. Each item felt like a small anchor, tethering her to this new, temporary reality. As she wrestled a heavy box of canvases from the boot, a figure emerged from the deepening gloom, walking with a steady, unhurried gait from the direction of the lighthouse that stood like a silent guardian further down the headland. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved with an economy of motion that spoke of long familiarity with the land and the sea. Even in the fading light, Alara could make out the dark expanse of his hair, wind-tousled, and a shade darker than the stormy sky. He wore a thick, oilskin jacket, its collar turned up against the elements, and sturdy boots that crunched softly on the gravel track. He stopped a few feet from her, his presence a sudden tangible weight in the damp air. His eyes, she realized as he drew closer, were the color of the sea on a clear day, an unexpected piercing blue that held a deep, unreadable calm. They held her gaze for a beat longer than was strictly polite, a silent assessment that made her heart give a small, surprised jump against her ribs. "You must be Alara," he said, his voice a low rumble, surprisingly warm despite the chill in the air. It carried a slight, indefinable accent, like the ancient stones of the cottage itself, weathered, authentic. "Kaelin Thorne, I manage the property." "Yes," she managed, feeling a blush creep up her neck. She pushed a damp strand of hair from her face, suddenly acutely aware of her rain-soaked clothes and travel-weary appearance. Even more beautiful than the pictures. A faint smile, like a fleeting glimpse of sunlight, touched his lips. It transformed his otherwise serious face, softening the rugged lines etched around his eyes. It has its moments, especially when the elements decide to cooperate. He gestured towards the cottage. "Everything all right? Power's been a bit temperamental with this weather." "I think so," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "Just got here actually, still getting settled." He nodded, his gaze sweeping over the open car boot. Looks like you could use an extra pair of hands. Without waiting for a response, he reached past her, his arm brushing lightly against hers, sending a jolt through her that she quickly dismissed as residual road fatigue. He effortlessly lifted the heavy box of canvases, making it seem feather-light. "Oh, you don't have to," Ilara began, but he was already turning, heading towards the cottage door. She followed, a strange mix of gratitude and something else, a prickle of awareness, stirring within her. His scent, a clean outdoorsy mix of sea air, damp wool, and something uniquely masculine, drifted back to her. Inside, he placed the box carefully by the fireplace. "I'll get a fire going for you. It'll take the chill off." Before she could protest again, he was moving with purpose, gathering kindling, expertly arranging logs. The rhythmic scrape of a match, a flicker of flame, and soon a small tentative fire began to dance in the hearth, chasing away the shadows. The warmth spread slowly, a comforting embrace against the damp cold. Ilara found herself watching him, mesmerized by the quiet efficiency of his movements. His hands were strong, calloused, yet surprisingly gentle as he tended the fledgling flames. He was a man deeply connected to his environment, a part of the wild landscape rather than merely a visitor. "Thank you," she said genuinely. "That's wonderful." He looked up, his blue eyes catching the firelight, glinting like sapphires. "No problem. It's what I do. Any other issues, you have my number. It's on the fridge." He hesitated, then added, "There's a storm front moving in tonight. Could be a bit wild. Don't be alarmed by the wind." "I won't," she promised, though a thrill of apprehension mixed with excitement ran through her. A storm. Alone in an ancient cottage on the cliff's edge. It was exactly the kind of dramatic solitude she'd craved, but now, with Kaelin Thorne's quiet presence, it felt different. Less lonely, perhaps. More charged. He lingered for a moment longer, his gaze falling on the scattered art supplies. "Artist? Photographer," she corrected, a little shyly. "Landscape. I thought this place, it would be perfect for inspiration." He nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing slightly as he looked at her again, as if seeing her for the first time through the lens of her craft. "It has stories to tell," he murmured. "If you know how to listen." The quiet intensity of his words hung in the air between them. He wasn't just talking about the landscape, he was talking about something deeper, something she felt but couldn't quite articulate. He was acknowledging her purpose, her quest, in a way no one else had. Then, with another brief nod, he turned to leave. "Good night, Ilara. Try to get some rest." "Good night, Kaelin," she replied, her voice a little breathy. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving her alone once more. But the silence was no longer quite so empty. The warmth of the fire, the scent of the sea, and the lingering impression of Kaelin's presence filled the space. A new kind of atmosphere settling in around her. She unpacked slowly, each item a ritual. Her camera gear, lenses gleaming. Her sketchbooks, filled with half-formed ideas. She laid out a simple meal of bread, cheese, and fruit on the worn wooden table, eating by the flickering light of the fire. The storm Kaelin had warned of began to gather its forces. The wind howled like a banshee, rattling the ancient window panes, and the roar of the waves crashing against the cliffs below grew louder. A constant, thundering bassline to the night. Curling up in the leather armchair, a thick wool blanket draped over her, Ilara found herself surprisingly content. The wildness outside mirrored a certain wildness within her. A restless spirit that had been dormant for too long. She watched the fire dance, its flames casting a warm, golden glow on the stone walls, and thought of Kaelin. His quiet strength, his piercing eyes, the way his smile had briefly softened his rugged face. He was an unexpected element in her carefully planned retreat, a stark, grounding presence in this untamed place. She tried to read, but her mind kept drifting. The cottage itself felt alive, full of whispers from generations past. She imagined lighthouse keepers, fishermen, artists like herself, seeking solace or inspiration within these very walls. And then, she imagined Kalen, living his life amidst this raw beauty, his hands working, his eyes scanning the horizon. What stories did he carry? What secrets did those sea-blue eyes hold? The storm intensified. Rain hammered against the roof, and the wind shrieked, making the old timbers groan. Suddenly the single bulb flickered, then died, plunging the cottage into complete darkness. Ilara gasped, a small sound, but it was swallowed by the storm. She fumbled for her phone, its flashlight beam a feeble circle in the vast blackness. A quick search yielded a box of matches and a couple of thick beeswax candles she'd seen on the mantel. She lit them, and the cottage was transformed. The soft golden glow of the candlelight cast dramatic, dancing shadows, making the familiar objects seem mysterious, ancient. The roaring fire became the focal point, its warmth and light a beacon against the encroaching darkness. She shivered, pulling the blanket tighter around her. The cottage felt smaller, more intimate, cocooned by the storm. And then, a sound. A distinct rap on the heavy wooden door, barely audible over the wind. Ilara froze. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Kalen, talk. She hesitated for a moment, then rose, clutching the blanket around her. She unlatched the heavy bolt and pulled open the door, a gust of wind tearing at her hair, whipping the candlelight wildly. Kalen stood on the threshold, a dark silhouette against the tumultuous night. Rain plastered his hair to his forehead, and his oilskin jacket glistened. He held an old hurricane lamp, its steady glow cutting through the gloom. "The power's out," he stated, his voice a low rumble above the din. "Thought you might need this." He extended the lamp towards her. "And maybe some company for a bit, if you're alright with it. It's going to be a rough night." His eyes, dark with the reflections of the storm, and the lamp's flame, met hers. There was a question in them, an offer. And something else. Something she couldn't quite name, but that resonated deep within her. "Come in," she said, her voice barely a whisper but firm. She stepped aside, letting him enter. He moved past her, bringing with him the scent of rain and sea and something wild. He placed the lamp on the table, its light joining the candles, creating a warm, inviting glow. He shucked off his dripping jacket, hanging it on a peg by the door. His shirt beneath was a dark, thick wool, molded to the strong lines of his shoulders and chest. "Thank you," she said, her gaze lingering on him. "I appreciate it. It's a bit unsettling, this storm." He turned to face her, a faint, reassuring smile on his lips. "It can be. You get used to it, or you learn to respect it." He gestured towards the fire. "Mind if I sit for a bit, just to make sure everything's holding up?" "Please," she said, pulling the armchair closer to the fire. "Make yourself comfortable." He sat in the opposite chair, his long legs stretching out towards the hearth. The firelight played across his face, highlighting the strong planes of his cheekbones, the slight stubble along his jaw. He seemed utterly at ease, a natural part of the wildness outside, yet completely grounded within the cozy confines of the cottage. A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the roar of the wind and the crackle of the fire. Ilara found herself stealing glances at him, taking in the way the firelight illuminated the texture of his hair, the strong line of his throat as he swallowed. There was a quiet strength about him, a profound stillness that was deeply attractive. "You're a long way from home, Ilara Vance," he said eventually, his voice soft, breaking the spell. She looked at him, surprised. "How do you know that?" He gave a small, almost imperceptible shrug. "I can tell. And the Land Rover's got city dust on it. You're seeking something, aren't you?" His directness was disarming. "Yes," she admitted, looking into the flames. "Peace, maybe? A new perspective? Things got a little crowded back in the city. The sea has a way of clearing the mind," he mused, his gaze also on the fire. "It strips away what's unnecessary." "Do you ever leave?" she asked, a sudden curiosity bubbling up. "This place, I mean. The lighthouse, the cottage. It seems all-encompassing." He was silent for a moment, a thoughtful frown creasing his brow. "Sometimes. But I always come back. There's a pull here. A different kind of crowded, perhaps, but one I understand. His eyes met hers, and for a fleeting second, she felt as if she were looking into the depths of the ocean itself, vast and ancient. And you? What do you hope to find, specifically, in the wild? The question hung in the air, intimate and searching. She felt a strange urge to tell him everything, to lay bare the anxieties and disappointments that had driven her here. But she simply said, truth. Authenticity. Something real to capture with my lens and within myself. He nodded slowly, as if her answer made perfect sense to him. It's here, he said, his voice a low, almost husky murmur. If you're willing to look. The storm raged on, but inside, the cottage felt like a sanctuary, a small island of warmth and light against the vast, dark ocean. The fire crackled, the candles flickered, and the air grew warmer, infused with the scent of wood smoke and the subtle masculine scent of kaolin. Ilara felt a deep sense of calm settle over her, an unfamiliar peace she hadn't realized how desperately she needed. His presence, so quiet and undemanding, was profoundly comforting. She found herself relaxing, her shoulders dropping, the tension she'd carried for months slowly unwinding. She reached for the bottle of amber liquid she'd bought earlier, a local whiskey. Would you like a drink, to ward off the chill? He smiled, a genuine, easy smile that reached his eyes. I wouldn't say no to that. She poured 2 generous measures into mismatched tumblers she found in the small kitchen, the clinking of glass sounding loud in the quiet room. She handed one to him, their fingers brushing. His skin was warm, roughened by work, and the brief contact sent a familiar, unexpected spark through her. To the storm, he murmured, raising his glass. To new beginnings, she countered, and they clinked glasses, the sound a delicate counterpoint to the wild symphony outside. The whiskey was smooth, fiery, warming her from the inside out. She took a slow sip, her gaze drawn to kaolin. He was watching her, his eyes unreadable, but with an intensity that made her breath catch. The firelight danced in their depths, making them seem deeper, more mysterious. This place. It's captivating, Ilara said, trying to break the spell of his gaze, yet reluctant to look away. It feels like it holds so many stories. It does, he agreed, his voice a low hum. Generations have lived and loved and lost here. The stones remember. He took a slow sip of his whiskey, his eyes still on hers. And some stories are still being written. The implication hung in the air between them, thick and potent. The storm outside seemed to fade, replaced by a storm of a different kind, brewing within the small, candlelit cottage. Ilara felt a blush creep up her neck, a delicious heat that had nothing to do with the fire. Her pulse quickened, a soft drumbeat beneath the surface of her skin. She watched him, her mind a whirl of sensation. The way his broad shoulders filled the chair, the subtle flex of muscle in his forearm as he lifted his glass, the curve of his lips as he sipped the whiskey. He was rugged, elemental, and utterly captivating. The silence grew, charged with an unspoken awareness. Her gaze lingered on his mouth. The faint line of his stubble, the way his lower lip was slightly fuller. A sudden, almost overwhelming urge to reach out, to trace the line of his jaw, to feel the warmth of his skin, surged through her. He must have sensed it, for his eyes darkened, a raw primal intensity entering their depth. He put his glass down slowly on the stone hearth, the soft thud echoing in the quiet. Then he leaned forward, just slightly, his gaze never leaving hers. Ilara, he murmured, her name a soft caress on his lips, a whisper swallowed by the storm. The world narrowed to just them, the fire, and the wild beating rhythm of her own heart. The air shimmered, thick with unspoken desire, with the promise of something vast and untamed, like the ocean outside. She felt drawn to him, an irresistible pull that felt both ancient and utterly new. She wanted him to bridge the small distance between them, to reach out to touch her. She wanted to feel the warmth of his hand, the strength of his arms. He shifted, his knee brushing lightly against hers. The contact was electric, sending a jolt through her entire body. She inhaled sharply, her lips parting. His eyes dropped to her mouth, lingering there for a long, breathless moment. The storm outside howled, a symphony of wildness, but inside a different kind of storm was just beginning to brew. His eyes dropped to her mouth, lingering there for a long, breathless moment. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the wild rhythm of the storm. The air crackled, thick with unspoken longing, with the weight of all the moments that had led them to this precipice. She felt the warmth radiating from him, a silent magnet drawing her closer, even as she remained perfectly still, caught in the intoxicating spell of his gaze. He shifted again, his knee now pressing more firmly against hers, a delicious pressure that sent shivers through her. She felt the subtle tremor in her own hands, clasped tightly in her lap. Her lips parted further, a silent invitation, a desperate plea. The soft sigh that escaped her was barely audible above the wind's shriek, but his eyes, sharp and discerning, caught it. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, he leaned in. The scent of him, rain-kissed earth, warm skin, something subtly masculine and utterly intoxicating, filled her senses, eclipsing even the rich aroma of the burning logs in the hearth. Her eyelids fluttered, then closed, a silent surrender to the inevitability of the moment. She felt the whisper of his breath on her skin, warm and tantalizing, then the feather-light brush of his lips against hers. It was a tentative exploration, a question rather than a demand. Her own lips, soft and yielding, responded instantly, parting slightly in welcome. The first touch was gentle, an exquisite shock that rippled through her, silencing the storm, silencing her own frantic thoughts. It was softer, sweeter, more profound than anything she had imagined. He lingered there, a delicate communion, tasting, sensing, allowing her to taste and sense him in return. Then, with a soft groan that vibrated against her mouth, the gentleness deepened. His hand, warm and firm, lifted, cupping her jaw, his thumb stroking the sensitive skin just beneath her earlobe. Her head tilted instinctively, granting him deeper access, and his other hand moved to her waist, drawing her closer until there was no space left between them, only the delicious press of their bodies. Knee to knee, thigh to thigh. The kiss deepened, a slow, sensual exploration. His lips moved expertly against hers, coaxing, demanding, receiving. She felt herself melt into him, her fingers unclenching from her lap to find purchase on his shoulders, grasping the soft fabric of his shirt. The world outside, with its furious wind and driving rain, receded entirely, replaced by the intimate universe of their shared breath, their entwined senses. His tongue, warm and velvet soft, traced the seam of her lips, and she gasped, a soft, involuntary sound of pure pleasure. Her lips parted wider, inviting him in, and he accepted, his tongue meeting hers in a dance of exquisite tenderness and growing passion. It was a kiss that spoke volumes, of longing held, of desires finally unleashed, of a connection that felt as ancient and elemental as the storm outside. Time ceased to be a linear progression, dissolving into a series of intensely felt moments. His hand, still cupping her jaw, shifted, his fingers weaving into the silken strands of her hair at the nape of her neck, gently tugging, urging her closer still. She arched into him, her body humming with a vibrant energy she hadn't known she possessed. The taste of him was intoxicating, clean, subtly masculine, utterly addictive. When he finally reluctantly broke the kiss, it was only by a fraction of an inch. Their foreheads rested together, their breaths mingling ragged and sweet. His eyes, dark and heavy-lidded, opened, gazing into hers with an intensity that stole her breath anew. A faint smile played on his lips, a knowing, tender curve that made her heart ache with a pleasure so profound it bordered on pain. "Elara," he murmured, her name a rough whisper against her lips, a sound that resonated deep within her soul. It was the first word he had spoken since the kiss, and it held all the weight of their silent communion. She couldn't speak, her throat tight with emotion, her body trembling faintly. She simply gazed back at him, her eyes mirroring the raw desire and burgeoning affection she saw in his. His thumb, still nestled in her hair, stroked gently, sending delicious shivers down her spine. He pulled back just enough to look at her fully, his gaze sweeping over her flushed cheeks, her slightly swollen lips, her dilated pupils. There was a question in his eyes, a silent asking of permission, a profound respect that touched her deeply. "Are you cold?" he asked, his voice a low rumble, surprisingly steady given the fire in his eyes. He gestured vaguely to the storm outside, then to the thin fabric of her dress. Elara managed a faint shake of her head. "No," she breathed, her voice a little shaky. "Not anymore." The warmth of his presence, the heat of their kiss, had chased away any chill. A slow, tender smile spread across his face, lighting his eyes with a gentle warmth. "Good," he murmured, his gaze dropping to her mouth again, a clear invitation. She didn't hesitate this time. She leaned in, seeking his lips, hungry for the taste and touch she had just discovered. This kiss was less tentative, more assured, a deepening of the connection they had forged. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her onto his lap, her legs falling naturally to either side of his, her body settling against his as if they were always meant to fit this way. The sensation of his hard thighs beneath her, the solid strength of his chest against her breasts, sent a wave of pure sensation through her. Her arms instinctively wrapped around his neck, her fingers tangling in the thick, dark hair at his nape. His scent, amplified by their closeness, enveloped her, a potent aphrodisiac that made her head swim. His hands, warm and firm, roamed her back, tracing the curve of her spine, then dipping lower to the small of her back, pressing her even closer. She felt the delicious friction of their clothes, the subtle give of her dress against his shirt, and a deep ache began to bloom low in her belly. The storm raged outside, each gust of wind a wild song against the windows, each crash of thunder a dramatic punctuation to the escalating passion between them. But inside, it was a haven, a world entirely their own, insulated by the warmth of the fire and the intensity of their shared desire. He broke the kiss once more, his lips trailing a path of fire along her jawline, down her neck. Her head fell back, exposing the sensitive skin of her throat, and a soft moan escaped her as his lips found the pulse throbbing at the base of her neck. His breath was warm, his touch exquisite. He nipped gently, sending a jolt through her, then soothed the spot with his tongue, a tender reparation that only intensified the pleasure. "You're beautiful, Elara," he whispered against her skin, his voice rough with emotion. "So beautiful." His words, soft and heartfelt, were like a balm to her soul, igniting a confidence she hadn't known she possessed. She tightened her arms around his neck, pressing herself closer, wanting to feel every inch of him. He lifted his head, his eyes searching hers, a silent question once more. Her answer was in her gaze, in the slight parting of her lips, in the way her body instinctively leaned into his. His fingers, with a gentle grace, found the delicate buttons that ran down the front of her dress. Each small pearl button released from its loop felt like a silent promise, a deepening of the intimacy. He worked slowly, deliberately, his eyes never leaving hers, making sure she was comfortable, that she was willing. As the top buttons came undone, the cool air of the room kissed her skin, a momentary contrast to the heat radiating from his body. He paused, his fingers resting just above her collarbone, his thumb tracing the delicate curve. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper, his eyes dark with a mixture of desire and profound respect. Elara nodded, her gaze unwavering. "Yes," she breathed, the word a soft exhalation of certainty. "More than sure." A slow smile, tender and utterly captivating, spread across his face. He resumed his task, unbuttoning the rest of her dress with a meticulous care that was both thrilling and deeply reassuring. The fabric, once a barrier, now became an invitation. As her dress parted, revealing the soft lace of her chemise beneath, his eyes lingered, admiring, reverent. His hands slipped beneath the opened panels of her dress, warm against her bare skin, tracing the curve of her waist, then moving upwards to cup her side. He pushed the fabric gently off her shoulders, letting it fall to her elbows, then to her lap, a soft, silken pool around her. The room was lit by the dancing flames of the hearth, casting long, shifting shadows that played across their bodies, deepening the intimacy, making the moment feel timeless and sacred. The storm outside continued its furious symphony, but inside, a quiet, fervent passion was unfolding, a dance of two souls discovering each other in the heart of the wild night. His hands, strong and sure, moved to the delicate straps of her chemise, pushing them down her shoulders. The lace-trimmed fabric gave way, revealing the swell of her breasts, barely contained by the soft material. He inhaled sharply, his gaze captivated, a silent appreciation that made her blush fiercely, yet filled her with a thrilling sense of empowerment. "Elara?" he murmured again, his voice thicker now, laced with undisguised desire. He leaned in, his lips finding the soft skin of her shoulder, kissing the exposed curve, then trailing a path of fire along her collarbone. She shivered, not from cold, but from the exquisite pleasure that rippled through her. His hands moved, gently pushing the chemise lower, until her breasts were fully exposed to the firelight, to his hungry gaze. A wave of vulnerability washed over her, quickly replaced by a thrilling confidence as she saw the adoration in his eyes. He reached out, his fingers trembling slightly as he cupped one breast, his thumb brushing over the sensitive peak. A gasp escaped her, a soft, involuntary sound. The sensation was electric, igniting a fire deep within her, a yearning that pulsed through her veins. He watched her reaction, his eyes dark with an unspoken question, and she leaned into his touch, a silent affirmation of her desire. His thumb continued its gentle caress, stroking the peak until it hardened, taut and eager beneath his touch. Her breath hitched in her throat, her body arching slightly, seeking more. He leaned in, his gaze fixed on her mouth, then lowered his head, his warm breath fanning her skin before his lips enclosed her nipple, drawing her in with a soft, suckling pull. A jolt of pure pleasure shot through her, making her cry out softly. Her fingers tightened in his hair, holding him close, urging him deeper into the intoxicating embrace. He suckled gently, then more firmly, his tongue swirling, teasing, his lips working magic that sent waves of heat through her entire being. She felt the world spin, the edges of reality blurring, leaving only the exquisite sensation of his mouth on her skin, the warmth of his hands, the solid strength of his body beneath hers. Her hips began to move instinctively, a slow, sensual sway against his lap, seeking a deeper connection, a release from the delicious torment he was inflicting. He lifted his head, his eyes blazing, his breath ragged. "You feel incredible," he whispered, his voice hoarse, raw with desire. He shifted beneath her, and she became acutely aware of his own aroused state, a thrilling confirmation of their shared passion. His hands moved from her breasts, tracing the curve of her ribs, then down to her waist, his fingers finding the soft skin of her lower back beneath the remaining fabric of her dress. He lifted her slightly, giving her room to move, to adjust, to feel the delicious friction of their bodies. The storm outside seemed a crescendo, a fitting soundtrack to the tempest brewing within them. Rain lashed against the window panes, and a distant roll of thunder vibrated through the floorboards. But Elara was only aware of him, of the intoxicating scent of his skin, the warmth of his breath, the exquisite torment of his touch. He leaned back against the cushions of the sofa, drawing her closer, until her bare breasts were pressed against his chest, the soft fabric of his shirt a delicious contrast to her skin. She could feel the rapid beat of his heart against hers, a shared rhythm that echoed the pounding in her own ears. His lips found hers again, a hungry, demanding kiss that left her breathless, dizzy with desire. Her fingers, still tangled in his hair, tugged gently, urging him to deepen the kiss, to consume her entirely. He responded with a soft groan, his tongue delving into her mouth, tasting her, claiming her. His hands, no longer content to merely touch, began to explore. One hand slipped beneath the delicate lace of her chemise, tracing the curve of her hip, then moving lower, towards the juncture of her thighs. The anticipation was almost unbearable, a sweet agony that made her tremble against him. She arched into his touch, her breath catching in her throat, her body a coiled spring of eager longing. His fingers, warm and knowing, found the soft, sensitive skin between her legs, gently stroking, coaxing, igniting a fire that threatened to consume her entirely. A soft whimper escaped her, a sound of pure, unadulterated pleasure. He broke the kiss, his eyes dark and heavy, gazing into hers with an intensity that promised everything. "Elara," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "I want you so much." Her answer was a silent nod, a fervent press of her body against his, a deepening of the primal rhythm that had begun to take hold of them. She wanted him too, with an aching intensity that transcended words, a desire that was raw, pure, and utterly consuming. His hands were a symphony of touch, one still exploring the burgeoning heat between her thighs, the other moving to her back, finding the small ribbon tie that held her chemise together. With a gentle tug, the ribbon loosened, and the delicate fabric fell away completely, leaving her completely bare against him. The feeling of skin against skin, the warmth of his body pressed against hers, was electrifying. She felt his muscles tense beneath her, his own desire palpable, a thrilling counterpart to her own. He shifted, adjusting her on his lap, making sure she was comfortable, even as his touch continued its intoxicating work. He leaned down, his lips trailing across her shoulder, then down to her breast, suckling gently, his tongue teasing her hardened peak. Each touch, each kiss, each brush of his skin against hers, built the tension higher, a delicate crescendo of pleasure that promised an even more profound release. The storm outside howled, a symphony of wildness, but inside a different kind of storm raged, a tempest of passion and longing, finally unleashed. Elara closed her eyes, surrendering completely to the intoxicating journey, her body alive, her heart full, her soul intertwined with his in the heart of the wild, beautiful night. She knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within her, that this was only the beginning. The delicate crescendo built, each pulse of pleasure radiating outwards, a sweet agony that bordered on divine. His touch, his rhythm, perfectly attuned to her nascent desires, pushed her further, higher. The scent of him, rain, earth, and something uniquely masculine, filled her senses, intoxicating and primal. Her nails might have inadvertently scraped his shoulders as she arched into him, a soft cry escaping her lips, lost to the roaring wind and the deeper roar that began to build within her own core. The storm outside intensified, as if mirroring the tempest within the cabin. A flash of lightning illuminated the room through the window, stark and brief, just as a brilliant flash of pure sensation exploded behind Alara's closed eyelids. It was a shattering, a profound release that tore through her, body and soul, leaving her breathless and utterly undone. Her muscles seized, a beautiful, violent tremor shaking her from head to toe, her hips lifting instinctively, meeting his thrust with a desperate, all-consuming urgency. He groaned, a raw, guttural sound that vibrated against her ear, his body tensing above her, his own release following swiftly, powerfully, as if drawn into her wake. He plunged deep, a final fervent claim, and then collapsed against her, heavy and warm, his breath ragged against her neck. The world, for a moment, ceased to exist, replaced by the thrumming echo of their shared ecstasy, the pounding of their hearts a frantic drumbeat against the storm's wild cadence. Elara felt the last tremors subside, leaving her limbs heavy and languid, her mind a beautiful haze. He was still within her, a delicious weight, a comforting anchor after the storm of their passion. His heart hammered against her breast, a rhythm that slowly began to synchronize with her own. She lifted a trembling hand, her fingers tracing the tense line of his jaw, feeling the stubble, the dampness of his skin. He stirred, pressing a soft kiss to her temple, then burying his face in the curve of her neck, inhaling her scent as if it were the most precious thing in the world. "Elara," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, barely audible above the wind. "My beautiful Elara." The simple utterance sent a fresh wave of warmth through her, a tender counterpoint to the fierce intensity they had just shared. She clutched at his back, her fingers splaying across the powerful muscles, pulling him impossibly closer. She didn't want him to move, not yet. Not when the feeling of him so deeply a part of her was still so exquisitely potent. Minutes stretched, timeless and profound, as they simply lay entwined, recovering, breathing each other in. The storm outside seemed to abate slightly, its howls becoming more mournful, less furious, as if it too had expended its wildest energy. Inside, the only sounds were their mingled breaths, the gentle creak of the old bed, and the residual hum of their bodies. Slowly, carefully, he shifted, pulling back just enough to look into her eyes. His gaze was dark, intense, filled with a raw vulnerability that melted her heart. She saw wonder there, and tenderness, and a question she didn't yet know how to answer. His hand came up, gently cupping her cheek, his thumb stroking her skin with infinite care. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice still hoarse. Elara could only nod, a soft, contented sigh escaping her lips. Words felt inadequate, too small to encompass the seismic shift that had just occurred within her. She reached up, her fingers threading through his damp hair, pulling his head down for a kiss. It was soft, lingering, a taste of salt and something sweeter, a promise of comfort and continued intimacy. He kissed her back with an almost desperate tenderness, as if trying to commit every sensation to memory. When he finally pulled away, he eased himself carefully, but not entirely, from her body. He moved to lie beside her, pulling the heavy quilt up around them, tucking her close against his side. Her head rested on his shoulder, her arm draped across his chest, her fingers playing with the fine hair there. The heat of his skin, the solid comfort of his presence, was a balm to her sated senses. I never imagined," Elara began, her voice a fragile whisper in the quiet room. "It was more than I ever dreamed." He chuckled softly, a low, rumbling sound that resonated through her. "More than I dreamed too, my love. So much more." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "You are magnificent, Elara, truly magnificent." She felt a blush creep up her neck, a sweet shyness mingling with the profound sense of connection. To be seen, truly seen, in such an intimate moment, was a revelation. "And you, Rhys," she murmured, tracing the line of his collarbone. "You are everything I didn't know I was looking for." A comfortable silence settled between them, punctuated only by the distant murmur of the receding storm and the gentle crackle of the embers in the fireplace. They lay there simply holding each other, allowing the warmth and the afterglow of their passion to seep into their bones. Elara felt a profound sense of peace, a quiet contentment she hadn't known was possible. It wasn't just the physical release but the emotional surrender, the laying bare of her soul to another, and finding it not just accepted, but cherished. After a while, Rhys stirred again, his fingers lightly stroking her arm. "I should perhaps check on the fire. It's growing cold." Elara instinctively tightened her grip on him. "No, don't go, not yet." He smiled, a soft understanding smile in the dim light. "All right, I'll stay, for as long as you want me to." She shifted, lifting her head to look at him properly. His eyes, even in the faint light, held a depth that captivated her. "Tell me," she prompted, her voice soft, "what were you thinking? Before tonight?" He sighed, a long, thoughtful sound. "Before tonight, I was thinking that I'd never met anyone like you, Elara. That you captivated me from the moment I saw you walk into the pub, all fire and fierce independence. I was thinking that I wanted to know everything about you, even if it seemed impossible. And then, when you were here, when we were talking, I felt something shift inside me, a recognition perhaps, as if I'd been waiting for you, without even knowing it." Elara's heart fluttered. "I felt it too. That pull, like a magnet. It was terrifying, to be honest. I've always been so careful, so guarded. But with you, it felt impossible to resist." She paused, remembering the slow, burning build-up to this moment. "I remember thinking, when you first touched my hand, that it felt like coming home." Rhys tightened his arm around her. "It felt like home to me too, Elara. And when you leaned into me earlier, by the fire, when I felt your warmth against my side. I knew I was in trouble. Good trouble." He chuckled again, the sound rich and deep. "I wanted to kiss you then, more than I've wanted anything in a long time. But I wanted it to be right. I wanted you to want it too, without a shadow of a doubt." "I wanted it," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "More than you could ever know. Every touch, every glance, every word. It was all building to this, wasn't it?" "It was," he agreed, his lips brushing her forehead. "A force of nature, like the storm outside. You can try to hold it back, but eventually, it breaks through." They lay in comfortable silence again, the intimacy of their shared confessions weaving a new, stronger thread between them. Ilara found herself tracing the contours of his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her fingertips. She thought about the life she had built for herself, orderly and predictable, and how in a single night, Reese had shattered its foundations, replacing them with something wilder, more vibrant, more deeply felt. And she wasn't afraid. Instead, she felt a thrill of anticipation for whatever came next. The embers in the fireplace cast dancing shadows on the walls, painting the room in hues of orange and gold. The storm had truly begun to recede now, the wind merely a gentle sigh against the windows, the rain a soft patter. A profound quiet settled, broken only by the occasional distant rumble of thunder. "You know," Reese said, his voice thoughtful, "I've lived in these mountains my whole life. I've seen countless storms, but never one that felt quite so significant." Ilara smiled, pressing a kiss to his shoulder. "Perhaps it was just waiting for us." He tilted his head, looking down at her, his eyes twinkling in the dim light. "Perhaps. Or perhaps it was just a magnificent backdrop for a truly unforgettable night." His hand began to stroke her hair, a slow, hypnotic rhythm that threatened to lull her to sleep. "Are you tired?" "A little," she admitted, snuggling deeper into his side. "But I don't want to sleep. Not yet. I want to savor this." "Me too," he said, his voice soft. "I feel like I could lie here with you forever." His fingers continued their gentle caress, moving from her hair to the curve of her neck, then lightly tracing the line of her shoulder. The touch was feather-light, barely there, yet it sent shivers of pleasure through her. She felt a new kind of warmth bloom within her, not the fiery heat of passion, but a gentle, pervasive glow. It was the warmth of deep affection, of knowing she was cherished and desired. She lifted her head again, her eyes meeting his. "Reese," she began, her voice a little breathless. "When you look at me like that." He leaned down, his lips brushing hers. "Like what, Ilara?" "Like you see something beautiful," she finished, her voice barely audible. "I do," he whispered, his gaze unwavering. "I see something breathtaking, something wild and courageous and utterly captivating." He kissed her then, a slow, languid kiss that promised a different kind of intensity, a deeper, more tender exploration. It was a kiss that spoke of patience and profound admiration, a kiss that tasted of lingering pleasure and the sweet promise of more. Her lips parted beneath his, inviting him deeper. His tongue traced the soft curve of her mouth, then dipped inside a slow, sensual dance that mirrored the rhythm of their earlier passion, yet with a newfound gentleness. Ilara moaned softly, her fingers tangling in his hair, pulling him closer still. The kiss deepened, becoming more insistent, more hungry, yet still imbued with that exquisite tenderness. As they broke apart, breathless, she felt her body begin to hum again, a soft, persistent thrumming that was both familiar and exhilarating. His hand had drifted lower, to the curve of her waist, then slowly, deliberately, to the soft swell of her hip. His touch was a question, an invitation, and Ilara found herself arching into it, her body instinctively responding to his unspoken desires. "We don't have to," he murmured against her lips, his breath warm and sweet. "Not unless you want to." "I want to," she breathed, her eyes shining in the dim light. "More than anything." His smile was slow, utterly captivating. "Good." This time, their movements were slower, more deliberate, a languid dance of sensation and connection. He kissed her eyelids, her nose, the sensitive skin behind her ear, eliciting soft sighs and shivers from her. His hands roamed her body, rediscovering curves and hollows, reawakening dormant desires with each stroke. Ilara returned his touch, her fingers tracing the planes of his chest, the tautness of his stomach, the strong line of his back. It was an exploration, a sensual conversation without words, each touch a whispered secret, each caress a blossoming promise. He shifted, rising above her slightly, propped on his elbows, allowing his gaze to sweep over her, lingering on her lips, her eyes, the gentle rise and fall of her chest. There was no urgency in his movements, only a profound reverence that made Ilara feel utterly cherished. She met his gaze, her own eyes alight with a mixture of desire and adoration. "You are so beautiful," he whispered again, his voice husky with emotion. "Every inch of you." He lowered his head, pressing soft kisses along her collarbone, down the graceful curve of her neck, to the hollow between her breasts. His warm breath, his gentle nips, sent delicious tremors through her. Ilara closed her eyes, surrendering to the exquisite sensations, her body growing warm and pliant beneath his touch. His lips found her breast, a soft suckle that sent a jolt of pleasure straight to her core. She gasped, her fingers tangling in his hair, holding him close. He teased her, his tongue tracing patterns around the sensitive peak before drawing her in fully, a gentle rhythm that made her entire body ache with longing. She felt herself grow moist, a sweet readiness spreading through her, a quiet urgency building. He lifted his head, his eyes dark with desire, mirroring her own. "Ready?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. Ilara nodded, unable to speak, her breath catching in her throat. He eased himself between her legs, slowly, deliberately, giving her time to adjust, to absorb the exquisite friction. This time, there was a profound sense of familiarity, a knowing, as their bodies reconnected. He paused, looking into her eyes, his own filled with a tender intensity that stole her breath. Then, with a slow, deep thrust, he entered her, a sigh escaping both their lips. The fit was perfect, encompassing, a return to a beloved haven. Ilara arched into him, her legs wrapping around his waist, pulling him deeper, closer. Their rhythm was different this time, slower, more languid, a sensual exploration rather than a frantic race to climax. Each thrust was deliberate, savored, a prolonged journey through shared pleasure. Ilara felt herself unraveling slowly, deliciously, her body softening, her mind dissolving into pure sensation. His movements were a gentle rock, a soothing sway that built steadily, inexorably, towards a new, more profound peak. He leaned down, burying his face in her neck, whispering words of endearment against her skin, praising her responsiveness, her beauty. His hands cupped her hips, lifting her slightly, deepening their connection with each slow, powerful stroke. Ilara pressed kisses to his shoulder, her fingers digging into his back, grounding herself in his strong presence. The pleasure intensified, a slow burn that spread through her veins, warming her from the inside out. It was a deeper, more resonant joy than before, born of familiarity and trust, of knowing that this man, this connection, was real and profound. Her breath hitched, her body tensing, as she felt the familiar pull towards release begin to build again, a sweet, inevitable tide. He felt it too, his pace quickening almost imperceptibly, his groans growing deeper, more urgent. Their eyes met, luminous in the dim light, a shared understanding passing between them. Then, with a final exquisite push, Ilara felt herself splinter once more, a wave of pure sensation washing over her, leaving her trembling and utterly spent. She cried out, a soft, breathless sound, her body arching one last time before melting into the mattress. Reese followed swiftly, his own release a powerful shuddering tremor that shook his entire body. He collapsed against her, his weight a welcome comfort, his breath hot against her ear. They lay intertwined, their bodies slick with sweat, their hearts pounding in unison, the silence of the cabin now filled with the sweet aftermath of their love. The storm outside had finally passed, leaving behind a profound stillness. Ilara could hear the soft drip of water from the eaves, the distant hoot of an owl, the gentle rustle of leaves. The world outside felt hushed, as if holding its breath, mirroring the quiet contentment that settled over them. Rhys stirred, lifting his head to look at her. He brushed a strand of damp hair from her forehead, his gaze soft and adoring. "Ilara," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "I never knew it could be like this." She smiled, a genuine radiant smile that lit up her face. "Nor I, Rhys, nor I." She reached up, tracing the line of his jaw, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath her fingertips. This is truly a beginning, isn't it?" He nodded, his eyes shining. "The most beautiful beginning I could ever imagine." He kissed her then, a kiss of quiet promise, of deep affection, of a future unfolding before them, as vast and wild and beautiful as the mountains that surrounded them. Ilara closed her eyes, savoring the taste of him, the feel of him, the profound sense of belonging that filled her heart. The night was still young, and the possibilities boundless. He deepened the kiss, a soft sigh escaping her lips, as his mouth moved with a tender hunger that mirrored her own. Her fingers, still tingling from their dance on his jawline, now wove into the silken strands at the nape of his neck, pulling him closer. If that were even possible. The world outside, vast and starlit, seemed to recede, leaving only the exquisite universe they created between them. The scent of him, a warm musky cedar with an undertone of crisp mountain air, filled her senses, intoxicating her, anchoring her to this moment, to him. His hand, which had been resting lightly on her waist, slid lower, tracing the curve of her hip, then moving up her back, pressing her body flush against his. She felt the hard planes of his chest, the subtle rumble of a silent groan that vibrated through her, igniting a tremor deep within her core. This wasn't just a kiss anymore. It was a conversation, a promise whispered without words, a fiery declaration of desire and connection. He broke the kiss slowly, reluctantly, his lips brushing hers in a lingering farewell before his forehead rested against hers. Their breaths mingled, ragged and shallow, as their eyes, dark with emotion, met. "Ilara," he murmured, his voice a low, husky rasp that sent shivers down her spine. "My Ilara." The possessiveness in his tone, gentle yet firm, thrilled her. She reached up, her thumb stroking his cheekbone. "What about you?" she whispered back, a teasing glint in her eyes. "You have a name, I presume?" A low chuckle vibrated through him, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. "Call me Liam," he said, his smile widening. "Liam, and I am entirely yours, Ilara." The simple declaration given with such earnestness made her heart swell. A blush crept up her neck, a sweet warmth spreading through her. Liam. It suited him, strong, warm, dependable. He took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, and gently tugged her away from the railing, away from the cool mountain air, towards the warmth of their suite. The moonlight, which had bathed them in its ethereal glow, now cast long dancing shadows across the polished wooden floors as they moved. The faint flicker of a fireplace within the living area beckoned, promising warmth and intimacy. They didn't speak as they walked, their joined hands a silent testament to the unspoken understanding that flowed between them. Each step was deliberate, a shared journey deeper into the night, deeper into each other. The soft lamplight inside the suite cast a golden hue on the plush furnishings, creating an ambience of luxurious comfort. A half-empty bottle of red wine stood on a low table, 2 crystal glasses beside it, silently inviting them to pause, but their eyes, their bodies, were fixed on a different destination. Liam led her past the inviting warmth of the living room, his gaze never leaving hers, until they stood at the threshold of the bedroom. The room was bathed in a softer, more subdued glow from bedside lamps, their light diffused by elegant silk shades. The large four-poster bed, piled high with crisp white linens and plump pillows, looked like a cloud waiting to embrace them. He released her hand, but only to place both of his on her waist, drawing her closer again. "Are you cold?" he asked, his voice low, his thumbs caressing the skin just above the waistband of her dress. She shook her head, her eyes fixed on his. "No," she breathed, "not anymore." A shiver, but not of cold, traced its way up her spine. It was a shiver of anticipation, of longing, of a delicious vulnerability. His gaze dropped to her lips, then traveled slowly over her face, drinking her in, as if seeing her for the first time, yet recognizing her, as if he'd known her forever. Then, with infinite tenderness, he reached out and unzipped the back of her dress. The cool metal slide, the whisper of fabric, sent a fresh wave of sensation through her. The dress, a rich emerald green that had felt so regal just hours ago, now felt like a barrier, a beautiful impediment to what lay beneath. She helped him, her fingers brushing his as they worked together. The fabric sighed as it slid down her shoulders, pooling at her feet. She stepped out of it, feeling the cooler air on her bared skin, a delightful contrast to the warmth of his hands still resting on her waist. She stood before him in delicate lace, feeling exquisitely exposed, yet utterly safe. His eyes, dark with admiration, devoured her. A slow, appreciative smile curved his lips. "Exquisite," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. He lifted a hand, his fingertips tracing the delicate lace strap of her bra, then moving to the curve of her collarbone, sending a delicious tremor through her. "You are truly breathtaking, Alara." Her heart hammered against her ribs. She reached for him then, her hands going to the buttons of his shirt. He stood still, allowing her to undress him, his gaze never leaving hers, his silent encouragement a powerful aphrodisiac. Her fingers, a little clumsy with anticipation, worked their way down the row of buttons, revealing the taut, muscular planes of his chest, dusted with dark hair. She felt the warmth of his skin beneath her fingertips, the strong beat of his heart echoing her own. When the shirt was undone, she pushed it gently from his shoulders, letting it fall to the floor with a soft thud. He shrugged out of it, then reached for his belt, his eyes still locked on hers, a silent question, a shared understanding. She nodded, a soft, almost imperceptible movement. This was happening. This beautiful, terrifying, exhilarating surrender. He shed the rest of his clothes with a quiet grace, his movements unhurried, respectful of the moment. Soon they stood before each other, illuminated by the soft lamplight, entirely vulnerable, entirely open. The air in the room thrummed with a palpable energy, a silent symphony of desire and reverence. Liam reached for her again, his hands finding the small of her back, drawing her close until their naked bodies were pressed together. Her skin tingled where it met his, a delicious friction that promised more. She felt the hard planes of his chest, the lean strength of his thighs, the undeniable proof of his desire. A soft gasp escaped her lips as he lowered his head, his mouth finding the sensitive skin of her neck, trailing a path of fire up to her earlobe. "You feel like home," he whispered, his warm breath a caress against her skin. "More than home. You feel like everything I never knew I was missing." His words, honest and raw, melted any lingering hesitation within her. She wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in the curve of his shoulder, inhaling his scent, a primal comfort that settled deep in her soul. He lifted her then, effortlessly, his strength a comforting embrace. She instinctively wrapped her legs around his waist, her body molding perfectly to his. He carried her to the bed, laying her gently on the cool, crisp sheets. The softness enveloped her, a luxurious invitation to surrender. He leaned over her, his eyes dark pools of desire and tenderness. His fingers traced the line of her jaw, then moved to her hair, spreading it like a silken fan across the pillow. "Beautiful," he murmured again, his voice barely a whisper. Then, he kissed her, a slow, deep kiss that tasted of longing and promise, of shared dreams, and a future just beginning to unfurl. Her lips parted for him, inviting him deeper, and he accepted the invitation with a gentle urgency that made her tremble. His tongue explored the soft cavern of her mouth, a dance of exquisite intimacy that sent shivers of pleasure radiating through her. His hands moved over her body, tenderly at first, then with increasing confidence, exploring every curve, every dip, every rise. Her breath hitched as his fingers brushed her breasts, teasing the sensitive peaks until they hardened in exquisite demand. A low moan escaped her, a sound she barely recognized as her own, a sound of pure, unadulterated pleasure. She responded in kind, her hands exploring the taut muscles of his back, the strong line of his shoulders, the firm curve of his buttocks. She felt the power and grace of him, the raw masculinity that both thrilled and comforted her. Their bodies moved together, a slow, sensual ballet of touch and taste, of breath and whispered sighs. When he finally moved over her, positioning himself, she arched into him, her body aching with a readiness that was both ancient and new. Their eyes met, a shared moment of profound connection, of mutual consent and overwhelming desire. "Liam," she breathed, her voice thick with emotion. He entered her then slowly, deliberately, a wave of exquisite sensation washing over her. She gasped, a sound of pure pleasure, her body stretching to accommodate him, welcoming him home. He paused, allowing her to adjust. His gaze fixed on hers, checking for her comfort, her pleasure. "Are you with me?" he whispered, his voice hoarse, his brow furrowed with tender concern. "Yes," she choked out, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes, not from pain, but from the sheer intensity of the moment, the overwhelming sense of rightness. "Oh yes, more than with you." Then he began to move, a slow, rhythmic dance that quickly built in intensity. Their bodies found a primal cadence, a shared rhythm that erased the world outside. Each thrust was a deeper plunge into ecstasy, each withdrawal a delicious tease. Her fingers dug into his shoulders, her legs wrapped tightly around his hips, drawing him closer, deeper still. The room filled with the sounds of their passion, soft moans, ragged breaths, the whisper of skin against skin. Liam's lips found her neck, her shoulder, her ear, leaving a trail of fiery kisses that ignited every nerve ending. He whispered words of adoration, of longing, of how beautiful she was, how much he wanted her, how deeply he felt this connection. Ilara felt herself unraveling, piece by exquisite piece. The pleasure built, a crescendo swelling within her, a delicious tension that promised an ultimate release. Her mind emptied of everything but the feel of him, the taste of him, the glorious rhythm that propelled them both higher and higher. The sensation was overwhelming, a vibrant, all-consuming fire that consumed her entirely. And then, with a final powerful thrust, the world exploded. A wave of pure, unadulterated ecstasy washed over her, a shimmering, incandescent climax that stole her breath and left her trembling. She cried out his name, a guttural sound of release, her body arching into his as he joined her, his own raw groan vibrating deep within her. They lay together for a long time, entangled, breathless, their hearts thrumming in unison. The air in the room, once charged with anticipation, now hummed with a profound sense of peace and utter contentment. Liam held her close, his arms a warm, protective cage around her, his breath soft against her hair. "My Ilara," he murmured, his voice still a little hoarse, his lips brushing her forehead. That was everything. She couldn't speak, only snuggled closer, her face pressed against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. It felt like coming home, like finally finding a missing piece of her soul. The journey to this moment had been long, sometimes lonely. But now, in his arms, under the watchful gaze of the silent mountains, she knew it had all been worth it. After a while, when their breathing had normalized, and the last delicious echoes of their shared passion had faded into a soft glow, Liam gently shifted, propping himself up on an elbow to look down at her. His eyes, still dark with lingering desire, were also alight with a tenderness that stole her breath. He reached out and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, his touch feather-light. "Sleep now," he whispered, pressing a soft kiss to her temple. "Rest. We have a lifetime for beginnings." She smiled, a sleepy, contented smile, and closed her eyes, drifting into a deep, dreamless sleep, enveloped in the warmth of his embrace, the scent of his skin, and the profound certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Unwind. The first rays of dawn, timid and golden, filtered through the sheer curtains, painting the room in soft hues of rose and pearl. Ilara awoke slowly, her senses stirring to the gentle warmth beside her, the steady rhythm of a breathing chest, the faint, intoxicating scent of Liam. She opened her eyes, blinking against the soft light, and found herself curled against him, his arm a comfortable weight around her waist, his hand resting possessively on her hip. A quiet contentment settled over her, deeper and more profound than anything she had ever known. She shifted slightly, just enough to look up at his face. He was still asleep, his features relaxed, softened by sleep, a faint stubble shadowing his strong jawline. She traced the line of his eyebrow with her fingertip, a small private gesture of affection. As if sensing her touch, his eyes fluttered open. They were still a little heavy with sleep, but a smile slowly bloomed on his face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice raspy with sleep, yet utterly melodic. "Good morning," she whispered back, her heart swelling with a joy so potent it almost brought tears to her eyes. Waking up beside him, seeing his smile, feeling his warmth, this was the most beautiful morning she had ever experienced. He tightened his arm around her, pulling her closer, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "Did you sleep well?" "Perfectly," she confessed, her voice thick with emotion. "The best sleep of my life." He chuckled softly, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through her. "Mine too." He kissed her again, a slow, lingering kiss that tasted of morning and promises. "I thought I was dreaming," he admitted, his thumb gently stroking her cheek. "That you were a beautiful mirage, conjured by the mountain air." She playfully swatted his chest. "No mirage, I assure you. Just me." She propped herself up on her elbow, gazing at him, truly seeing him in the light of day. He was even more handsome, more real, more utterly captivating than she remembered. "And just me," he returned, his eyes shining with a depth of affection that made her breath catch. "Liam, entirely real. And entirely yours." They spent the morning in the leisurely embrace of newfound intimacy. He ordered breakfast, and they ate in bed, sharing croissants and fresh fruit, sipping coffee, their knees occasionally brushing under the sheets. They talked, not about grand plans or weighty matters, but about small things, their favorite books, silly childhood memories, the simple joy of the present moment. Each shared story, each quiet laugh, wove another thread into the tapestry of their burgeoning connection. Later they stood on the balcony again, hand in hand, the morning sun warming their faces. The mountains, majestic and timeless, stretched out before them, their peaks dusted with fresh snow, glistening like diamonds. The air was crisp and clean, invigorating. "It truly is a beginning, isn't it?" Ilara said, echoing her words from the night before, but now with a deeper understanding, a surer conviction. Liam squeezed her hand, his gaze fixed on the boundless horizon. "It's more than a beginning, Ilara," he said, turning to face her, his eyes full of earnest devotion. "It's the start of an adventure, a journey into something vast and beautiful, just like these mountains. And I can't imagine anyone I'd rather explore it with than you." He leaned down and kissed her then. A kiss that tasted of coffee and passion, of enduring promises and boundless hope. It was a kiss that sealed their fate, a silent vow whispered under the vast, open sky. As the sun climbed higher, warming the peaks and valleys, Ilara felt a profound sense of peace settle in her heart. The night had been a revelation, a fiery convergence of souls. The morning was a confirmation, a gentle promise of all that was yet to come. With Liam beside her, she knew, with an unwavering certainty, that their story had just truly begun. and it would be a tale as breathtaking and endless as the mountains themselves.